want to tell you today about my favorite story in the Bible. It's the story of the prodigal son. In fact, some people call it the story of the lost son. I think even a better title for it is the story or the parable of the waiting father. In one way, it's a sad story, but in another way, it's a really wonderful story. The sad part of the story, in fact, I think there are several sad parts. There's the sad part about him ending up in the pig pen. But I think the saddest part of the story is not when the prodigal son is sitting in a pig pen. Remember that part of it? When he's left home, he's gone away from his father. He spends all of his inheritance. He ends up having to get a job feeding pigs. And then he actually ends up eating the food that's fed to the pigs. But I don't think that's the saddest part of the story. I think the saddest part of the story is in the opening lines when Jesus is telling this parable, and he says, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them came to his father and said, Father, I want my inheritance. And the Bible says that he gathered all that was his, and he left home. And I've asked myself, why did he leave? Because when you read this story, this father is a fantastic father. He gives to him what his son asked for. He doesn't kind of manipulate his son and make him stay with him. And when his son finally does come back home, he receives him. So I've asked myself, well, what was it between his relationship and his relationship between him and his father? Was that the reason why he left? Maybe it was because of what happened between him and his older brother. When you read the story about the older brother, have you read the story before, any of you? Of course, I think most of us have. He was a religious kind of guy. And he was proud and he was arrogant and he was hard. So maybe it was because, not because he had an unloving father, but maybe it was because he had a cruel brother. I've got the feeling that it was not because of his brother or they couldn't get along. I think there was something inside of the heart of this young son. There was some kind of pain that motivated him to leave. The Bible doesn't tell us what it was. It just kind of leaves it up to our imagination. You know, there's no such thing as meaningless behavior. When people do things, there's always a reason. There's always something that influences what we do. Now, if we do what is wrong, the Bible calls it sin. And God holds us responsible. No matter how much pain there is in our heart when we do something, no matter how much rejection or abandonment or abuse, if we sin in response to that, God still holds us responsible. But the wonderful thing is, even if He holds us responsible, He understands. He understands the pain that goes on in the human heart. Now, this young man had what I would think the Bible would call a wounded spirit. In fact, the Bible speaks of this in the book of Proverbs. There's this couple scriptures I'd like to quote to you, give you a couple references. It says in Proverbs these words, a glad heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is broken. Have you ever had a broken spirit? What causes a broken spirit? People live with pain. We have an epidemic of pain in our world today. Divorce causes pain. Child abuse causes pain. There is so much pain in people's hearts. And you know, if we are going to be the kind of people that feel what God feels, if we're going to represent His heart, then we are going to feel that pain as well. It's so easy, in fact, to experience your own pain and then come out of that pain, become a Christian, and all of a sudden you lose all touch with what you came from. And I want to challenge you today, I want to challenge me, that you and I remember where we've come from. That you and I carry always in our hearts a tenderness for the pain that people have. It is so easy to give people religion. It is so easy to say easy, cheap words. I mean, I saw drug addicts get saved, get delivered from all the stuff they were in, and turn around 3 days later and start preaching to people with no compassion. Don't lose your compassion for people who hurt. The essence of God's being is that He cares for a world that is in pain. This is why Jesus told the story of the prodigal son. You see, He was speaking to a crowd of religious Pharisees, religious leaders, and He was challenging them. In this story, there are three groups of people, or three peoples that are represented. There are the religious leaders that He's speaking to. Actually, there's four, isn't there? There's the religious folks that He was speaking to. There was the older son. There was the younger son. And then there was the father. Now you can imagine what kind of reaction he had from these Jewish men when he told about this father. What we're talking about these days we're together is the father heart of God. When we talk about God's heart, we talk about His innermost being. We talk about what's the most essential part of who He is. And we can't talk about God without understanding what kind of heart He has. And when God sees the pain that people have, the Bible describes Him as being moved with compassion. He sees the hurt. He sees the wounds in people's hearts. He sees what they go through, and He cares deeply. Our Father is waiting for us. What He's longing for us to do is take the step toward Him so that we can receive His love. And the first step that we have to take is that we have to acknowledge our need. We have to be honest. If there's a pain in our life, if there's a problem, if we're hurting, if we're driven, if we're filled with shame, whatever it is, we have to acknowledge it. If you're tired of the pain, if you're tired of the prison, the good news is, Father says, I'm waiting for you. Just turn to me. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to make yourself good. You can't anyway. He says, just turn. Just give me a chance. Just turn to me. And there He is. Before you can even get the words out, He's thrown His arms around you and He said, welcome home, son. I've been waiting for you.